Thank you so much, Rabbi Klein. And oh my gosh, yes, this Shabbat is the last Shabbat of 5784. And tomorrow night in our gorgeous, gorgeous Slichot service, which, by the way, Slichot, right, is the plural of Slicha, right? For those of you who are learning Hebrew, Slicha means I'm sorry, and Slichot is the plural. So with this Slichot, with this plural sorriness, we enter another step into our season of repentance as we come to the end of the month of Elul and prepare to welcome this new year. Over the last month, I know how many of you have been immersing in our really wonderful Elul learning, getting to know our wonderful new Cooperberg Ritmaster rabbinical interns, Alana and Marcus. We're writing with Rabbi Werber, studying mezuzot with Rabbi Moskowitz, learning Yiddish music with Cantor Rosen and with Joyce, and a whole range of topics with Rabbi Klein. And a few of you were learning with me a couple of weeks ago texts about the beautiful imagery of the gates of repentance, the actual gates, and when they open and when they close for the 10 days of repentance and this broader season of repentance. So after nearly a month of preparation, the Elul in which we stand outside those gates and prepare to knock, to prepare to ask that they be opened. Tomorrow night in our dedicated Slichot service, there will be prayers and piyutim, liturgical poems that give us that entrance into the language and the music of the high holidays that we'll all be listening to over the following weeks. You'll likely recognize some of the Hebrew phrases if you've been at high holiday services in the past. Things you'll hear like Slach lanu, forgive us, Shma kolenu, hear our voices, Rachem aleinu, have compassion on us, and Petach lanu sha'ar, open up those gates for us. What is the connection between Slichot and these gates that we imagine creaking open tomorrow night for our prayers to flow through? The image I sort of imbibed growing up, and I think for some of us, some others, it may resonate, was that the gates of repentance were truly like actual physical gates to heaven, the big golden or silver gates that you kind of see. And actually, the image that comes to me now is like in Far Side cartoons, that there are those big metal gates that open up in the clouds. And that somehow God is sitting behind those gates on a throne that is sometimes described as being compassion and sometimes described as being judgment, and is really a mix of the two. And of course, so much of the language that we embed into the high holidays that we read in our machzor is language of kingship, of melech, of king, malchuyot, that royal kind of language. And the idea that those royal gates swing open, and we are to file in and beg for forgiveness for the things that we didn't quite get right in the past year. But we don't have kings, those of us in the United States. Rabbinic Judaism did away with having high priests, and especially for those of us living in countries that rebelled against kings and said, no, we're not doing that anymore. This language might not resonate so much. One of my favorite poems on this theme is actually in our Kol HaNeshama Siddur that we use on Shabbat mornings for the liberal minyan at CBST, a poem by Sid Lieberman called A Short Amida. They say we're supposed to be in a palace, so we bow and take certain steps as the prescribed supplication drops from our lips. But what do we really know of castles and kings? My kitchen faucet constantly leaks, and the kids' faces usually need cleaning. If a door opened to a real palace, I'd probably forget and carry in a load of groceries. No, the door we stand in front of when the Amidah begins is silence. And when we open it and step through, we arrive in our hearts. Mine's not a fancy place, no jewels, no throne, certainly not fit for a king. But in that small chamber, for just a few moments on Sabbath, God and I can roll up our sleeves, put some schnapps out on the table, sit down together, and finally talk. That's palace enough for me. I love this poem. What do we know of castles and kings? Maybe that kitchen table is the image that works for us, and maybe rolling up our sleeves for an important conversation is our equivalent to opening up large, shiny gates. Those gates that we open tomorrow night with our prayers, the gates of repentance, I think I imagine more like this: pulling up a chair, rolling up our sleeves, pouring a drink, taking a deep breath, looking into someone's eyes. What I find when I walk through those gates isn't a king. Sorry, Charles. I do believe in a creator. I do believe in a divine being that is the source of the things that nourish us in creation, the source of all the goodness that we are given to try to make the world from. And I believe that that divine being is reflected in the face of every single human who has ever lived. We are created in the divine image. So when those gates open, I don't see gates to a throne in the clouds with somebody sitting on a throne behind them. But I see the gates that we are walking through every moment when we look at ourselves, when we consider our own souls, when we look at each other, when we pass by each other, and when we consider what is our relationship with whatever divine we may or may not believe in, with the universe if you don't believe in a divine. All these relationships are somehow through a gate. They're somehow through a door. This past year has made it very easy to feel deeply closed off from ourselves, from each other, and maybe even from the divine being that some of us believe in. The last several years have continually compounded so many very real fears. And I know that we all have unique but really overlapping fears. They're real. We know the more fear that we feel, the more we close ourselves off, but the more fear we're feeling, paradoxically, right, the more we need to connect, the more we need to be with people and facing ourselves and facing each other, facing the universe. So tomorrow, it's not a passive thing that we're saying, oh, we're going to come to Slichot, we're going to sing these words and these divine gates somewhere are just going to swing right open for us. We're actually going to grab those doors and pull them open, to find those gates in ourselves and in our lives and help pull them open. Tradition teaches that the gates close at the end of Ne'ilah. Why? The very end of Yom Kippur, when the sun is setting, and those of you who will be at the Javits Center or on the live stream, you'll see that sun setting behind the bima. That's like the gates closing. We have 10 days from the start of the new year to the end of Yom Kippur to have this wonderfully intense time of reestablishing connections with ourselves, with the divine, with the people around us. It's not easy to reestablish a broken connection. It really is not. I think most of us who have tried know it's hard. It's not easy to reopen doors that we have closed, or doors that others have closed, or doors that just seem like they've been shut and locked for years. On Yom Kippur, the traditional work of fasting and wearing white, abstaining from things that make us feel most alive, these are reminders every year to do the repair work that we can while we can. We don't know what the new year will bring. It is almost impossible to say this without getting a catch in my throat. It's going to be very hard to be hearing it over the next few weeks. We don't know what the next year will bring. The phrases of who will live and who will die. We really did not know that last year, and we do not know that this year. But we know that as long as we are here, being honest about treating our time as potentially limited, and doing what we can with the blessing of life that we have for every minute, every day, every month, every year that we have it. So when we feel like there's a door that's closed, that there's a gate that has felt locked, what do? Can we imagine in 5785? Can we imagine before then trying to hold the door open a tiny bit when it feels like it's about to slam shut? By asking a question, by taking a deep breath and waiting before responding to something hard, by not responding with anger, but trying to turn it into curiosity. And then the moments when we feel an impulse to just slam a door closed, I know we've all had that impulse, right? Instead, taking a moment to slow down a bit, take the deep breath, feel your hand on the knob of the door just a little bit longer, kind of hold on to that handle where it says pull or push, whatever it says, and just wait before letting it go. Several years ago, I had a perfect subway experience right between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which I know some of you know this story. Some of you have heard this story very recently, but I'm going to tell it again. On the Friday morning between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I was sitting on the downtown A train, and just as the doors were about to close, a man came running down the stairs, yelling, "Please hold the doors!" And there was a young woman on my train standing close to the door who, elbowed her way over to the door and just kind of held it for him until he raced over and jumped in. I think everybody in New York knows these moments, right? Of like, okay, you're going to be nice and hold the door for somebody. He jumped onto the train. He thanked her profusely. He called her my hero. And then as the doors actually slid closed, the voice of the conductor came over the intercom saying, "Do not hold the doors." And the man looked up at the intercom and said, "I'm sorry. Forgive me." And the doors closed and the train kept going. And it really felt like a perfect 10 days of repentance before the gates close in Ne'ilah kind of morning commute. Please stand clear of the closing doors. The world doesn't encourage us to hold doors open. It really doesn't, in all the different ways. But it's important to practice the ways that we can. Where have the gates closed in your heart this year? And where can you maybe start to pry them open a little bit? Where have you been cut off from the deepest and best part of yourself? Where have doors closed between you and the divine this year? However you define it. Where have doors felt impossible to walk through with others in your family or in your community? No doors can always, it's not that every door can be reopened, but there are some doors that slam in a moment of anger and can be gently opened up again. In this new year, I want to bless all of us with the ability to hold more doors open, to wedge in a foot when possible, to have strong arms and strong hearts to pull them wide open. And when Ne'ilah comes, I bless everyone that you feel able to walk through that gate with open arms, to greet the person you thought you might have been closed off from, to greet yourself, and to greet the divine. Shabbat Shalom.